Welcome back to Kings of Columbus, the Kings of the North version, Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. We are going to be running through Northern college football after the first weekend of the college football season. Landis, we have a lot lined up for people. I think they're kind of used to us by now, but this is a sort of another new version of what we're doing here on the podcast.
Yeah, it's an appetizer, I think, of things to come. But I do think we want to be able, like, this channel is 99.9% Ohio State football talk, and that's not going to change. But I do think it can be valuable to sort of understand the world that is existing around Ohio State, especially as it pertains to teams in the North and teams in the Big Ten. So that's what we're going to do here on Mondays.
We are going to rank the best teams in Northern football. We've sketched out the 28 teams that we claim. How many of them deserve to be ranked in our Kings of the North rankings? We're going to rank the 10 best players in Northern football. We actually have a name for that. We're going to do North versus South. Top 5 teams in each part of the country. Who's better? We're going to talk about Brian Ferentz. We're going to look ahead to college football week 2 next week. But we're going to start, this is kind of a new thing, with our Frantic 14. It's 7 topics in 14 minutes about Northern college football. And we'll start right now on Kings of Columbus, on Kings of the North. Number 1, Landis, I think there are 10 legitimate playoff contenders in the North. Last year, when we got to the first playoff rankings for the College Football Playoff Committee, there were 8 teams in the top 25 from our Northern group. I think by the time we get there, I think it's after week 9, late October, I think there'll be 10 in the top 20. I think the 10 teams at the top of Northern football right now are as strong and maybe stronger than the 10 best teams in Southern football. And we are talking about, we're going to get to our rankings, but just off, generally speaking, right? Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin in the Big Ten, Notre Dame as an independent, and then Oregon, Oregon State, Washington, Utah, and add Colorado. There is legit Northern football, and it might be obvious, but I want people to know about it.
I think I might stop short of saying that they're all legitimate playoff contenders.
No.
I think they're all very good. I think they're all very good.
No buts, no caveats.
Well, I think we need to be realistic. Like,
no, the South is not realistic. The South thumps its chest. We're gonna do some chest thumping.
Okay, we can do a little chest thumping. The North has 10, I think, potentially excellent football teams. I think is what I'll say.
Okay, it's only a 14 playoff, so it's hard to squeeze all 10 into the 14 playoff. Man, if we were at 12, when we get to 12, it's going to be awesome. Just be aware, I think, how good Northern football is. Number 2, we're talking Sean Lewis, the Colorado offensive coordinator. Why, Landis?
Because we didn't talk about him really all that much before the game against TCU over the weekend. All the talk was about Deion Sanders and the turnover of the roster and is this or is this not going to work? And a lot of people thinking it was not going to work. And I don't think we paid close enough attention to some of the hires that Deion made, and specifically the hire of Sean Lewis, the former Kent State head coach, as his offensive coordinator, a guy who orchestrated top 5 offenses 2 of the years he was at Kent State and had an incredible plan for their game against TCU, I think, to mitigate the impact of some of their weak points on that offense, to totally spread TCU out and carve what is probably, it turns out, not that good of a defense, or at least not that good of a secondary, up to the tune of however many passing yards Shadur Sanders had. I think it was 1 million.
Sean Lewis, $750,000 buyout that Colorado paid to get him away from Kent State. In 5 years at Kent State, he was 19-17 in the MAC. In the 5 previous years, Kent State was 9-30. He made Kent State a better place. People are talking about Deion Sanders in a certain way. I think this hire of Sean Lewis is like Urban Meyer hiring Tom Herman when he came to Ohio State. Deion identified a sharp offensive mind, up-tempo, a particular philosophy of how to attack. Tom Herman was so important to what Urban Meyer did at Ohio State. And as a head coach, one of your most important jobs is hiring excellent coaches. And for Deion Sanders to identify Sean Lewis and for Sean Lewis to dial it up like he did in his debut, there's a part of me, Landis, that thinks, like, how did the Big Ten allow Sean Lewis to get away? Sometimes I think the Big Ten has to be more innovative in hiring head coaches than MAC head coach of the week. And then sometimes there's guys like this, and it's like, why isn't this guy a head coach in the Big Ten? But maybe he will be in 2 years.
Yeah, I think he could be. And I do think that the word that I said to you when we were talking about this was serious. And I don't think people took Deion Sanders seriously. They viewed him as more of a sideshow. This was a very shrewd hire that I think is going to pay dividends for them this year.
All right, number 3 on our list, Nebraska, The Cornhuskers kind of blew it. Well, not kind of blew it.
Yeah, they did blow it.
They blew it. Minnesota guy made an awesome catch in the back of the end zone, wins that game. It's another one score loss for Nebraska that had been a bugaboo under Scott Frost. Matt Rule, game one, it still happens. So I think there's both like consternation, but maybe hope at Nebraska, and you are here to quash that.
Yeah, so this is more of a teardown job maybe than I think I was anticipating for Matt Rule at Nebraska. And if you look at his tenure or his coaching track record, he took it down to the studs when he was at Temple. He took it down to the studs when he was at Baylor. And those first seasons were not fun. So I want to play a game with you that is find the remaining wins on Nebraska's football schedule after they lose their season opener at Minnesota. They play Colorado next week. I don't think either one of us views that as a win for the Huskers. So let's go through it. They have Colorado. Loss? You're on a loss?
We will discuss that more in our look ahead at the end of this show.
After that, they play Northern Illinois, which just beat Boston College. Stick a pin in that as well. I don't think that's a guaranteed win. Louisiana Tech, probably a win. So we'll give that a 1 in the column for wins that I feel confident about for Nebraska. Michigan loss at Illinois, toss up versus Northwestern. I would think is a win. Northwestern.
Did you see Northwestern?
Awful.
Did you see them? They played football. Congratulations to those guys. That's a win for Nebraska.
Yeah. Purdue, I think right now I would say is a loss. At Michigan State, I would say is a loss. Versus Maryland, I would say is a loss. At Wisconsin, I think it's a loss. The last game of the year, Black Friday against Iowa, is probably a loss in what should be a fantastically ugly football game. So I'm at 2 wins on Nebraska's schedule that I feel good about. And like, obviously Matt Rule will survive that, but I think anyone who was looking for let's inject some juice into this program and maybe sneak a bowl game or bowl season by people, that ain't happening this year.
No, it's one of those. You can get very excited about recruiting. You can get excited about culture, but sometimes people get too excited about win-loss record in year one. And I think you're on it that's not going to be the case in Lincoln this year. Item number 4, Illinois. I'm calling it Holy Bielema. 4th and 4, a 33-yard pass to keep the Illini alive from Luke Altmaier to Casey Washington. Guy in his face. Unbelievable job by Altmaier to stand in and make the throw. Casey Washington, great coverage by Toledo, makes the catch, sets up a game-winning field goal at the end. Last year, Illinois started 7-1, but had a goofy week 2 loss at Indiana that threw a little bit of water on what was otherwise kind of a fire there, a Bielema fire. And they avoided that this year. And I got to give some flowers to my guy, Daquan Finn, the Toledo quarterback, who I thought hung in and played great in Columbus last year against Ohio State. He was only 10 of 19 for 153 against Ohio State, but he ran it 7 times for 70 yards and just fought and competed and made plays and was super impressed with him. He's a year older, 20 of 36 for 230 for Toledo, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, ran it 20 times for 75 yards. A year ago, I was like, where's he going to transfer to? Mm-hmm. I thought he was a Big Ten quarterback. He stayed at Toledo. It was a great opportunity for Toledo to try to get a win there. Instead, this 4th down play for Illinois saves them, sets up the game-winning field goal. I don't know if anyone else is calling it Holy Bielema, right? You're in on Holy Bielema, aren't you?
Yeah.
And so, Holy Bielema. I think, listen, this early season schedule for Illinois, like Toledo's really good. Now they they get Kansas this week, which is nothing to scoff at. Then week 3, it's Penn State, but they still, I think that's like I'm a little bit on upset alert for Illinois, Penn State. I think Illinois has a chance to start like 6-1 before they get to Wisconsin. And I think like pulling this game out, it's a non-conference game, but I have my eyes on Illinois in the West, Landis, because I just think for Altmaier to make a play like that, for them to pull out a game against a good Toledo team could mean something.
Luke Altmaier was not particularly impressive before he got to Illinois, and I was fairly down on that addition. He was fine in that game. Guy in his face, I think, is a nice way to say that he got folded in half on that play.
The defense at the edge rusher who dropped a great spin move had his armpit on Luke Altmaier's neck as he threw the ball.
Yeah. Terrence Taylor is the name of that defensive end, by the way. I wanted to make sure to write that down because he put that right tackle in a blender on that play. Yeah, I can see it with Illinois. I think the West is pretty wide open, although Wisconsin did look good this week. And it's nice to pull out a win like that. Like with Illinois, they're playing Toledo. They're playing Kansas, as you mentioned. Like they're going to have I don't think it's insane to say that when we look back on this season that Illinois will have played 3 conference champions.
Yeah. So tip of the cap to Toledo, tip of the cap to Illinois for getting it done. Number 5 in the Frantic 14, Utah and your guy Kyle Whittingham. Why are we talking about him?
Is this the best coach program in the North?
In America? I mean, like outside of Tuscaloosa, unbelievable. They're without like 3 of their most important guys on defense, their starting center and their starting quarterback, and they just embarrass Florida because Kyle Whittingham is the man.
Didn't have Brant Keithy either. Like their best their best offensive playmaker. And it's like Kyle Whittingham has been there forever, and I do think this is. I think they are the poster children as a program, or the program itself is a poster child for like continuity. Quick trivia question: how many of Utah's 10 assistant coaches have been there fewer than 5 years?
Oh, 1.
The answer is 2. But they've both been there this is their second year, so they're not new either.
Okay.
Kyle Whittingham has been there since 2005. His strength coach has been there just as long. His defensive coordinator has been there since 2016 in that role, and since 2008 overall, and his offensive coordinator has been there since 2019. Incredible continuity on that staff. They are a machine. They've won double-digit games in 3 of the last 4 seasons and the 3 last real seasons. They are a player in the Pac-12. I do think it could get away from them potentially while they navigate these injuries. They got to go play at Baylor next week. Baylor just lost to Texas State and that isn't very good, but it's still a Power 5 opponent, and they are navigating a rash of injuries here. So, but if they can get past that, player in the Pac-12 for sure. For
all the schools we talked about trying to find quarterbacks, we didn't think Utah with Cam Rising was one of them. He's coming back from an ACL. He wasn't quite ready. They played Bryson Barnes 35 snaps, Nate Johnson 19 snaps, and Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator. That's the guy Notre Dame tried to get, and they wouldn't pay the buyout to get him away from Utah. He dialed it up. And the weird thing about this, first non-conference Power 5 win for Utah since 2017 against West Virginia. Now, they almost got one against Ohio State in that Rose Bowl game a couple years ago, but that was kind of a thing to get. They did lose to Florida last year. Utah-Florida, great intersectional showdown. Last year, Florida had Anthony Richardson, right? This year, they don't, and they get depantsed. And listen, if a Northern team got depantsed by a Southern team the way that Utah undressed Florida in this one, everybody be screaming about it. It's the coaching, and I thought the Billy Napier hire at Florida was good. The level of coaching difference between Utah and Florida in this game was doctorate to middle school. It was embarrassing for Florida, and Kyle Whittingham got it done. Props to him.
Yeah.
Number 6, and this is what we're at the end of the Frantic 14. 14 minutes, 7 topics. The last 2 topics, you're planting your flag. You're giving a hot take, something you believe in. Mine is this. I think Washington has a chance to have the best passing attack we've seen in college football in I don't know how long. The pressure they put on opposing defenses, and you like Boise State with the points against Washington this week, and then they just came out and just threw 40-yard bombs play after play. They don't have to hit every one of them. It's unbelievable the level of attack from that Washington passing offense. We're going to talk about Michael Penix later. Roma Dunze at receiver, 7 catches, 132. Jalen Polk, 3 catches, 101. Jalen McMillan, 8 catches, 95. It's relentless. And when you look at the yards per attempt, they are at well above 11 right now. And like, that's not where they were last year, but you're talking about the sort of yards per attempt that Oklahoma was putting up in the heyday of Lincoln Riley. Like, they are going to get after you. What Alabama was doing in 2020 with Mac Jones and Jalen Wall and Devontae Smith and all those guys, John Mechie. I just think this has a chance to be not just good, but excellent. And by the way, like, if we thought the last 2 years, Ohio State was the team that you wanted to see go take on an SEC defense with its passing attack. Right now, that's Washington. I think this has a chance to be an extraordinary passing season for the Huskies.
I don't disagree with that. Penix and the receivers were awesome. Michael Penix, man, like among the prettier throwers of, I'm not saying he's pretty, although he's fine. He's a handsome man. The ball comes out of his hand prettier than I have seen, I think, perhaps from any other quarterback. And maybe that's just because he's left-handed and looks different, but it's beautiful.
11.7 yards per attempt in that game for Washington. Last year, they were at 8.4. Again, just like sort of over the years, Oklahoma in 2017, 11.7. Oklahoma in 2018, 11.3. LSU in 2019, 10.6. Alabama in 2020, 11.0. That's what we're talking about here. And I don't think it's going to go away, because I thought Boise State's a real team, and Washington just took it to them and never let up. Plant your flag, Landis. This is the last part of the Frantic 14.
Yeah, I'm going to plant the flag, I think, I don't know, into Jeff Hafley, near Jeff Hafley in Chestnut Hill.
On his foot. Just be careful where you plant.
Yeah, right into his, just into the toe, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if you fire a coach after week one, right? But I feel like Boston College should be perusing some resumes here. Losing 27-24 in overtime to Northern Illinois. Good MAC program. Not the MAC favorite this year, Toledo is, but a team that won the MAC a couple years ago, a well-coached team, physical team, has a former P5 quarterback in Rocky Lombardi. Like, it's not the most embarrassing thing in the world to lose to a team like that, but I think that's a game that Jeff Hafley needed to win, I think, if he wanted to save his job, because wins are going to be hard to come by on their schedule, and this is a guy who went 3-9 last year. He went 6-5 in his first year in 2020, which it's fine. I don't know how much that counts. 6-6 in year two, 3-9 last year, 0-1 to start this season, have been non-competitive in the ACC the last 2 years. You scour his resume for like impressive wins. I think you kind of come away with 2. They beat a ranked NC State team last year. They beat Missouri. There's a lot of Colgate and UMass and Temple on that resume when you're looking at the games that Boston College has won. And this is a program that under Steve Adazio, whatever you think of him, was going to bowl games more often than not when he was the head coach there. And Boston College at the moment is trending in a direction where that's not going to happen. So I guess you do need to ask yourself, 1, what you want to be, and then 2, is Jeff Hafley the right guy to get you there? But I think this is a lesson in teams probably needing to be a little more shrewd in their hiring practices. And when a guy is sort of an NFL journeyman with nothing of note on his record, and then goes to a place like Ohio State that is littered with first-round draft picks, and his defense is suddenly good, maybe that's more about the draft picks than it is the coach.
Reminds me a little bit of Chris Ash at Rutgers, leaving Ohio State as an assistant. Chris Ash got fired in year 4 at Rutgers. He was 8-11, 8-33 when he got fired. So that's worse than Jeff Hafley. Jeff Hafley's 15-21 right now, but it's kind of a similar deal. And this is a little bit of a fork in the road thing. Jeff Hafley leaving Ohio State after one season as the defensive coordinator hurt Ohio State. It did set him back. Now, he's still been the national title game in 2020, but it wasn't what Ryan Day was expecting. And Jeff Hafley jumped kind of at the first good opportunity at Boston College, and it doesn't seem like it's working out for him either.
Sure doesn't.
When we come back, that's it for the Frantic 14. We planted our flags. We went a little longer than 14, but we're trying to keep it snappy until we get to the meat of this show, which is going to be ranking teams, ranking players. When we come back, we will give you our King of the North rankings. How many teams in the North deserve to be ranked, and how did Landis and I come together and make those rankings? We'll do it next on Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus. And we are back on Kings of Columbus, Kings of the North version, here on this Monday after week 1 of the college football season. Landis, you and I are now going to rank the best teams in the North. Again, there are 28 teams that we claim as Northern teams, and we're going to do this each week, and we're only going to rank the teams that we think deserve to be ranked. But this week, you and I each rank the same 10 teams. So do we just share a brain, or is this pretty obvious?
No, I think it's pretty obvious. I'm curious to see where you and I differed on where exactly we slotted those teams, but I did find it noteworthy that after a week of games, this list has extended from 8 teams in the preseason to 10 now.
Number 1 is Michigan, and you and I both had Michigan number 1. Let's talk about J.J. McCarthy, who feels like the guy who is the elevator for Michigan. How did you think he played in their win over East Carolina?
Really well. You know, I like ECU is not a tremendous group of 5 teams. Like I don't want to make too much of it, but my hesitation, if you want to call it that, with Michigan is how close to elite can JJ be when they need him to be? And obviously you don't need him to be when he's playing against East Carolina, but I thought there were things last year, his feel in the pocket, his probably too quick of a trigger to escape when stuff wasn't there, extend plays, and then things get a little wonky on you. And against teams like this, it wouldn't matter. If he would have played that way, they still would have won by the score they won by, or perhaps even more. But I thought like his pocket movement, some of the throws he made downfield were really impressive. If you were someone who wanted to see, I think, tangible improvements with JJ McCarthy, I felt like you got it on Saturday. And part of that, I think he's healthier. He said like last year he was coming off a shoulder injury, and maybe that impacted his throwing mechanics a little bit. He said he feels unencumbered by dealing with what was probably a sham of a quarterback competition anyway last year, but he said he felt that. So he was just kind of playing free and loose, man. And he had a couple throws in that game. One I sent to you was like a corner route on a touchdown. The Roman Wilson, who had 3 touchdowns in that game. Like 2 underneath defenders. He put it on a top shelf, only where Roman Wilson can get it. Very accurate pass, super strong arm on a rope to the far corner of the end zone. And like, if he's doing stuff like that regularly, then I think that elevates Michigan's offense to the place it needs to be to truly contend for a national championship. And I get that sounds crazy after playing ECU, but we can go off of what we can go off of. And I thought JJ looked better.
I thought it looked like he had his Tate removed. No crazy person in that game. That was all. Yeah. I felt like every throw he made had a base under it, whether that was sitting in the pocket or whether that was scooting and maneuvering and then resetting and ripping, and just looked like he grew up emotionally, mentally, and physically. It looks like his arm got stronger, and he even the back foot throw that he makes against the Ohio State blitz for the first touchdown in that game last year. I just thought he would even make that throw better right now, like this version of JJ McCarthy. So yes, it's East Carolina, but I thought he looked in total control. And then you add in Blake Corum, who's doing Blake Corum things, vision, cuts, finding holes. That was great. They're making plays on defense. Josh Wallace had an unbelievable pick. I don't know I'd ever seen a DB pick a back shoulder throw before. Like, he made a back shoulder move, and then it turns out that they overruled it and said it wasn't a pick, but it was an unbelievable play. They got pressure. Again, it's East Carolina. But after the game, I think in the post-game show, you noted to me, as I was, Ohio State scored 23, Michigan only scored 30. The difference between that is night and day. Michigan did whatever it wanted to do and dominated in the first half, and Ohio State was sputtering a little bit. My new stat, I'm trying to make this a stat, we'll see if it becomes a stat, is your number of offensive touchdowns to number of punts, because it takes turnovers out of the equation. Turnovers are mistakes. And then, if you go for it and don't get it on 4th down, or you make a field goal, miss a field goal, that's not the ultimate success. So it's offensive touchdowns versus punts. Michigan, 4 offensive touchdowns, 2 punts. Ohio State, 2 offensive touchdowns, 4 punts. I thought Michigan looked great, and I would have had them number 1 in the preseason. I thought they looked worthy of that ranking.
I mean, I didn't say anything to knock them off the spot. I think we get into some interesting conversations when we do this, like of how much do you wipe the slate clean once games start, and then how much do you factor in the quality of the opponent that you beat? And certainly some teams we're going to talk about beat teams who are better than East Carolina. But if you're number 1 and then you sort of act like it, I think that's worthy of rewarding as well.
Number 2 for both of us is Washington. No hesitation by me on this one. I thought their passing attack was just absolutely relentless. 42 passes, 18 runs in that game. Their leading back is out for the year with the preseason injury, but it doesn't matter. They used Jalen McMillan and a Wildcat to score a touchdown. I thought they got him the ball yards after catch. Rome Odunze is a big physical guy that nobody can cover. I thought they got after Boise State. Like that Taven Green, right, is the Boise State quarterback?
Yeah.
They got after him a little bit. I think they have players at 3 levels of the defense for Washington. I was high on Washington coming into the year. I'm even higher after the way they looked in week 1.
I'm honestly probably about the same. Maybe I'm slightly higher. The thing that I was wondering going into that game was whether or not Boise State could run the ball well enough to kind of keep the passing attack for Washington from doing what it did, and that wasn't the case. Washington, I think, more or less did kind of bottle that rushing attack up. I still have questions about their defense. Boise had nearly as many first downs as Washington did. It was 22-21. Boise, I think, had a couple big plays, maybe I think 3 plays of 40 yards or more. And I do wonder if at any point, is it going to matter that Washington can't really run the ball, because they didn't do so impressively against Boise. I think that'll probably be a struggle for them throughout the year. Will that matter as it goes through the Pac-12? Perhaps not, but I do think it might matter if we're going to talk about them as a playoff team. I do think that might matter when you get to that stage, but it was impressive. Like, I'm right there with you with the passing attack. I just think there's some other things there that I'm a little unsure of.
I mean, we might be in Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma, Alex Grinch middle school defense version of things. That this is the kind of thing that pops up when you're in the playoff. When Washington's the 3 seed and they're playing an SEC team, and we're like, oh, I don't know how they match up here. It's like, well, they got there. I really don't have regular season concerns for them in the Pac-12. I don't know who's going to cover them. I don't know who's going to stop Penix. And I think they still have enough playmakers, right? I mean, like consistently on defense, but Braylon Trice will get after you. I think they can be one of those teams that, all right, maybe you score on them, but then they get a sack on you on second down and they get you off schedule and they force enough punts that you can't keep up with their offense. And it is the most relentless passing attack that I think I've seen. Yeah. I just think it's next level. So no doubt to me, Washington at number 2. We did differ on our number 3 team. Our combined rankings, Penn State is 3rd. What did you think of Drew Aller as a starting quarterback? It is a really good win because there are people who are looking for, it's like a 20-point spread. Penn State versus West Virginia. Is this like a little, hey, everyone's high on Penn State and then they come out lay an egg? And they didn't do that. So we have to give them credit for taking care of business. And James Franklin covered at the end by having the backup quarterback score with 5 seconds left for I'm not sure why.
To cover, I think. So like I almost want to count that as not covering, which is fine. Like I don't like covering.
Vegas counts it. Vegas counts it.
Yeah. I thought Penn State was good. I think that win and the way they played is getting a little overblown. Drew Aller's stat line on paper looks very good. You watch some of the throws, like his accuracy, I thought was fairly inconsistent. One of his touchdown passes to Keandre Lambert-Smith should have been an interception, and Keandre Lambert-Smith somehow got his hands on the ball and then ran for like a 70-yard touchdown. There were a couple other misfires where passes were completed, but had the ball been in a better spot, like there was opportunities for yards after catch there. It's Drew Aller's first start, right? Like that he's a little inconsistent, I think is fine. The arm is super strong. He's gigantic. I think he's going to be able to navigate pressure pretty well. I think players are going to kind of fall off of him when he does get pressured sometimes. So I like what I saw. I'm just not ready to anoint him like the Heisman Trophy candidate just yet. West Virginia's offensive line is pretty good, and I thought they did move Penn State a little bit. It was a close game for a large chunk of the game. So Penn State was fine. It was like a fun, exciting atmosphere. It was Power 5 versus Power 5. It was a cool matchup to see. I didn't come away thinking like Penn State's ready to rock. I do think they have some things to work through still.
There are a couple quarterbacks that we're evaluating here. Michael Penix, maybe Shadur Sanders at Colorado to some extent, maybe Sam Hartman at Notre Dame, where it's like really the offense is sort of all about them, right? That you're not going to pair it with a devastating run game. But when you think about what JJ McCarthy is doing at Michigan, when you think about what Wisconsin's doing, and we'll get to them in a second with their run game, when you think about Penn State with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton I lower the curve of what I expect from the quarterback, because even if you're still pass first a little bit, there's a compliment to it. Like Penix at Washington, there's no compliment, right? It's all about him. So he has to be unbelievable. Notre Dame, I don't think they ran the ball okay in their opener in Ireland, right? I mean, they have some backs they'll run through there, but I don't think we're talking about the Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan level. So like we said in the preseason, with like Aller doesn't have to carry it. And I do think they had a couple defensive guys show up. Didn't Abdul Carter at linebacker have a pretty good game?
He had a good game. Yeah.
They have some guys who flash. And I certainly didn't change my mind about Penn State. Maybe they didn't elevate, but I didn't change my mind. Yeah. So let's get to the two teams that we have tied for 4th. Ohio State and Colorado. You had Ohio State 3rd on your list. I had Ohio State 7th on my list. And this is the question I want to ask you. If Ohio State and Colorado had played on Saturday, who would have won?
I think, I don't know. I think I would pick Ohio State. Like Colorado, It was fun as hell to watch what Colorado did. I think it turns out that like TCU's defense might be bad, and also like they didn't stop TCU. So like Ohio State's defense was awesome and its offense stunk. Colorado's offense was awesome and its defense was fine. So I don't know. They're just sort of the inverse each other in week one. I think I'm probably picking Ohio State in that game. I think it's an interesting question, like who has the best player on the field, and that answer might be Colorado. But,
well, we'll get to that when we get to the player rankings.
Yeah, I'm picking Ohio State in that game.
So it's like one of those. There's the hypothetical neutral site game, who would win, and there's the how they played on Saturday in that game. If it had just so happened that 11 years ago, when Ohio State was making its schedule for 2023, they had scheduled Colorado, and that was the game that we were playing. Like, who would have won? And when you saw the way Shedeur Sanders attacked TCU, yes, Ohio State's defense is much better than TCU. Listen, TCU made the national title game last year, and I know they lost a lot of guys, but this is not an incompetent program. This is not a talentless.
It might be an incompetent secondary.
I think do you think that it's going to wind up, which is more likely, that by the end of the year, the way it plays out, TCU is bad enough to lessen the Colorado win, or Colorado is good enough to lessen the TCU loss? I think it's the second. I think I am not putting a ton. TCU made the national title game last year, and they didn't lose 25 starters. And I understand this is a team that knows how to win, a coach that knows how to win. They did lose their offensive coordinator, right? And I think that hurt them. But they still kind of moved the ball as they wanted to. I don't know, man. I thought Shedeur Sanders and what Colorado did, the belief they had, Colorado came out, they were breaking tackles right from the start. It's like, these guys are in. Like, they played their butts off. Yeah, we already talked about Sean Lewis. I thought for Colorado in week one with a brand new roster to be as precise as Colorado was and as motivated as Colorado was, because those are the two things. And sometimes you're one or the other. Sometimes you're precise and you're like robots, but you don't have any heart. And sometimes you're playing your butts off, but you're all over the place. And I thought they had that combination, and they believed, man. And I'm just like, if that's what Ohio State with the new starting quarterback and new tackles would have faced, Indiana's defense is better than Colorado's. But I don't know, man. Ohio State would have had its hands full on Saturday. No?
I mean, it's in a different equation entirely. The thing that's hard, the thing that makes it difficult for me to answer that question is that Indiana did not try to score against Ohio State.
I know.
So if they did, what would that have looked like? I just don't think, like, to answer your question that you did ask me, like, I actually think it's more likely that TCU is not quite that good this year. I don't like their quarterback. They lost their best receiver and they lost their best running back. And I actually think that secondary is legitimately awful. They were terrible in that game. They weren't covering anybody, and then they missed like 1 million tackles. And maybe that's week one stuff, and they'll get better. But I was not impressed with that team, which is fine because TCU is not usually a team that they got to the national championship was awesome for that program. I don't think they're a team that is expected to just reload every year and be as good as they were the year before. So if they take a step back, that's not surprising to me. And I'm not really trying to take anything away from Colorado. I agree with everything you said about them. They were precise. They were cohesive. They were locked in. They had a great plan. I think TCU probably did not take them as seriously as they needed to, and Colorado made them pay for it. I think if Ohio State played Colorado, Ohio State would win.
Would have won. So I'm not saying that Colorado is better than Ohio State. I'm saying the way they played on Saturday in week one, the way things shook out. Because the hard thing about Ohio State, and why I had them 7th, you understand, okay, it is new tackles, it is a new starting quarterback. You understand all those things, right? But it also is. So, yes, other teams aren't starting new quarterbacks, but we have to go by what actually is happening. And so based on what actually is happening, I thought Ohio State right now looks like the 7th best team in the North. Blow the doors off people for the next 2 weeks before Notre Dame, and my mind will change.
Yeah, that's fair.
I feel like there's been like a backlash to the backlash. Like Kyle McCord wasn't that bad, and people are putting out the stats for everybody's first starts at Ohio State, and I'm going to backlash the backlash. So by NFL passer rating, which is something that PFF does, and it's like the NFL formula of everything, and touchdowns count a lot and that kind of thing. People have been comparing CJ Stroud's first start, Justin Fields' first start, Kyle McCord's first start. by NFL passer rating, okay, week 1 of their careers, Justin Fields, because their passing yards are very similar, right? Their raw stats are very similar. Justin Fields was 4th of the 43 quarterbacks in week 1 in 2019 in NFL passer rating. CJ Stroud was 20th of 44 of the week 1 quarterbacks in his first start in 2021 in NFL passer rating. Kyle McCord is 36 of 38. So there wasn't a ton there. And by the way, Ohio State, 2 of 12 on third down, was 118th in the country. Like the only teams worse than them are like Florida, who didn't show up against Utah, and Marshall, and like some really bad teams. And by the way, Indiana, the only teams with fewer completions than Indiana in week 1 are the 3 service academies. So they played a team that played like a service academy. I want to come back around on, it was not great. Like it was not good. So if it was like, it doesn't feel very good. We're being too harsh. No, I don't think we are being too harsh. I don't think it was a very good offensive performance. It doesn't mean it's not going to get better. I think it will get better. But judging them right now, I could not put Ohio State higher than 7th on my list.
Yeah, I that's fair, I think. Who else did you have ahead of them? If you want to get into that.
Notre Dame and Wisconsin. So we had Ohio State and Colorado tied for 4th and 5th. 6th on our list is Wisconsin. I thought Wisconsin came out and did what it wanted to do. I think some people said like Tanner Mordecai, the new quarterback, didn't play a good game. He had 2 goofy picks.
He had terrible picks.
Well, the one, he threw a touchdown pass 2 plays before the pick and on a beautiful post, and the guy dropped it. And then he threw a pick. And then the second one is what happens to everybody. Guy comes up, linebacker is at the line of scrimmage, and then drops in coverage. You don't see him. Mm-hmm. That happens it happens to guys all the time in college. So I get it. I thought Braylon Allen and Chez Mellusi both ran for 100 yards, and I thought the marriage of the two things, they don't have the receivers to run the air raid. They want to do it yet. Braylon Allen had 7 catches, check down, but they're going to drop back and throw it. They're going to spread people out, and then they have a double hammer. Chez Mellusi looked awesome. He had a 89-yard touchdown run out of nothing against a Buffalo team that I think would beat Indiana. So I was impressed by Wisconsin in week 1. I thought they kept the heart of who they are and added a throw game on top of it that wasn't perfect, but you can see how it's going to make them more difficult to defend. I liked the way Wisconsin played on Saturday better than I liked the way Ohio State played.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. The bar is lower. So like I think it's easier for Wisconsin to meet expectations or exceed them than it is for Ohio State. If I want to be fair to Ohio State. I thought Wisconsin looked fine. Like I actually was not super impressed. I was impressed with like I guess their ability to look functional as a passing offense, because that has been enough of a challenge for them. So that was different, and I think you can see the vision there. I did like seeing Braylon Allen and Chez Mellusi kind of run into later boxes, which is something that I think I mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago when we initially were ranking our players of the North, and I was talking about Braylon Allen. So like, I think it could be good. I thought like Chimere DK is a pretty good receiver too. Like I think if there's a game breaker there, maybe it's him. I was just not super impressed with Tanner Mordecai. I think Wisconsin's defense is probably still going to have to try to figure some stuff out against better offenses, by the way. I think it'll play one this weekend. So that'll be a good test for them. We'll talk about that later in the show. Good start, like for the Luke Fickell era for sure. The offense I thought there was a chance the offense would look clunky as they were trying to do some of this new stuff, and it didn't. So I'll give them credit for that.
Tied for 7th in our rankings, Utah, Notre Dame, and Oregon all tied for 7th. I actually was not that impressed with Oregon. They dropped 81 on Portland State. Portland State is like non-functional, and they just ran up tempo and used their passing game as their rushing attack, and just like up tempoed an inferior team for 4 quarters to score 81. And it kind of turned me off. And I thought Bo Nix is just like throwing 3-yard passes. So I think like the idea of what Bo Nix did for Oregon compared to what Shadur Sanders or Michael Penix or JJ McCarthy did, like is not even close at all. And I came away not that impressed with Oregon. I actually had them 10th on my list. They wind up tied 7th for us. You still hate Notre Dame.
I still hate Notre Dame. I guess it's a similar conversation, right? Like Notre Dame has played nobody. Oregon played an unranked FCS team that I think hasn't had a winning season in like 10 years. So like I'm not saying that I'm impressed whatsoever by what Oregon did. That was a name your score game. They might as well have just practiced that day. But I was higher on Oregon like coming into the season too. So I kind of just left them where I had them. And like Utah, maybe there's a conversation like should Utah been ranked ahead of them for beating Florida? Probably. Wisconsin, I don't know. And Notre Dame, you're right. I am not. I want to see Notre Dame play like a real team first, which they might this weekend.
Yeah, Notre Dame beat Tennessee State last week. You're not going to get anything out of that. Oregon, right? They ran a 4th and 1 off tackle play that Bucky Irving ran 55 yards for a touchdown on. It's like it's just an off tackle play, and Portland State didn't tackle anybody. It's just like it was not. I thought they were trying to be cool, and it rubbed me the wrong way.
Bucky Irving had 4 carries for 119 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. So I didn't think Oregon was it. Don't get fooled by Oregon. And they have a game coming up on Saturday that I would be on the lookout for. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. 10th on our list is Oregon State. Oregon State, actually, you hate Notre Dame. So you had Notre Dame 10th and Oregon State 9th. I had Oregon State 8th. Just the combined rankings, they wind up 10th. Their offensive line played great. I thought they handled San Jose State better than USC did.
Absolutely.
Certainly their defense did. So I come away from this in the Pac-12. I think Washington, Oregon State, Utah, and Colorado can all beat USC. I don't know if Oregon can. Oregon State and USC don't play, but if you're enamored with USC and Caleb Williams is awesome, there are 4 teams in the Pac-12 that, based off week 1, to me, can absolutely beat them. DJ Uiagalelei looked comfortable. They didn't ask him to do too much. He ran it. He threw it for like 230. And their offensive line built a stinking wall, man. And then their defense played much. It's a good comparison. USC played played San Jose State in week 1. Oregon State plays them in week 2. Oregon State's defense played significantly better than USC's defense did. Oregon State's 10th for us. I liked what I saw from Oregon State.
Yeah, I liked it too. I want to see them against like a more high-powered offense, maybe. I think there's some questions about Oregon State's defense and what that ceiling is. But that's not like a pushover offense either. Like Chevin Cordero, the quarterback of San Jose State, is a very good player, and gave USC fits, as you said, and didn't do as much against Oregon State. So that's promising. That offensive line and Damian Martinez, and then like mixing in DJU as a runner, they're going to punish a lot of teams. So does DJ have the ceiling as a passer that he needs to have for them to win the Pac-12? I think it's a fair question. I liked a lot of what I saw from him. He was off target on some other throws too. Didn't have to be special on that day. If the moment arrives that he needs to be special, can he answer that call? I'm not 100% sold on that idea just yet, but totality of what Oregon State can do to a team, I very much like.
All right, so our overall Kings of the North rankings: Michigan 1, Washington 2, Penn State 3, Ohio State and Colorado tied for 4, Wisconsin 6, Utah, Notre Dame, and Oregon tied for 7, and Oregon State 10. Those are the teams that deserve to be ranked. When we come back, we're going to go North versus South. The top 5 teams in the South by our rankings. How do they compare to our top 5 teams in the North? Next on Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus. Back on Kings of Columbus, Kings of the North. We're going to do our Southern rankings, Landis. We always do this as part of this show. It's going to be called Behind Enemy Lines. We give our top 5 teams from the rest of the country, right? From the South. But we're going to talk about them in comparison to the Northern teams. So we already gave our Northern rankings. So the matchup of the best teams in each part of the country. We have Michigan as the 1 seed in the North. Our 1 seed in the South is Florida State. And I'm going to take a minor victory lap here. This is the team that I picked to win the national championship before the season. I like Jordan Travis, their quarterback, as a Heisman guy. I think in the real AP poll, Florida State was ranked. The highest they were ranked was 3rd by any individual voter. I was supposed to have an AP vote. Then when I came to you guys, I don't have an AP vote anymore. My preseason poll, 100% guaranteed, would have been Michigan 1, Florida State 2. I think Florida State, Michigan is a toss-up. I absolutely think Michigan could beat Florida State, even though I thought Florida State did everything I thought they would do to LSU on Sunday night.
I think in some ways they're a little bit mirrored, right? Like really good offensive lines, potentially erratic quarterback play, depending on what kind of mood the player is on that particular snap. Good stable of running backs. I think the difference in my mind right now between the two would probably be Florida State's defensive line. And granted, like we got to see Florida State's defensive line go up against a really high caliber offense in LSU's, and we didn't get to see that from Michigan. So like Michigan's, I think, has a high ceiling as well. I think Michigan's defensive tackles could be quite good this year with Chris Jenkins and Mason Graham, and I thought Kenneth Grant looked really good against East Carolina too. So It would be a compelling matchup. I might lean a little more toward Florida State, which is probably recency bias because they have the big win. But I would like to watch a game with Jordan Travis and JJ McCarthy as the triggermen, because I think you're guaranteed entertaining, even if it might be slightly inefficient and erratic at times.
Did you watch Florida State and think to yourself, Doug was right?
I watched the first half of the game and was feeling pretty good about my LSU pick to win a national title. And then like Florida State came out in the second half and just put it on them. Like both sides of the ball just owned that game, and we're whooping them up front on both lines. So yeah, it turns out you were right. Florida State Clemson at the end of the month, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think Florida State's going anywhere. I think everything they are is completely legit. But also, talk about ceiling for Michigan. If you wanted to see a national title get over the top kind of ceiling again, I think what JJ McCarthy did and what their defense did and the way their corners played and everything, again, it's East Carolina. I thought we saw that in week 1. So I think if you thought this was going to be the best version of Michigan, I think you're probably still on track for that. All right. Game number 2, the 2 seeds, it's Washington versus Bama. Now, I had Bama 2nd and Georgia 4th. You had Georgia 2nd and Alabama 3rd. I thought Jalen Milroe for Alabama as the starting quarterback did exactly what you want him to do. He is still the fastest quarterback I've ever seen in college, and he threw it really well. He stood in the pocket and ripped a deep shot touchdown that was like, yep, that's it. So he is extraordinary as a runner. And if he's pretty good as a passer, and he was in week 1, that's all they need. And they started Caden Proctor, the true freshman at left tackle, monster. Man, that one's going to stick in Ohio State's craw for a while. J.C. Latham at right tackle. The rest of the stuff is like Bama doing Bama things. But if you thought, I thought their quarterback battle was dicier than Ohio State's. I thought Bama should be pretty happy with the quarterback play right now.
I feel like we should do an episode on Caden Proctor as the poster child for what separates the North and the South. Because even if that kid didn't go to Ohio State, he should be playing for a team that we talk about on a weekly basis and not playing for Alabama. He's from Southeast Polk. Like high school is literally in the middle of nowhere. I went there to talk with him and his high school teammate, Xavier Wampa, who plays at Iowa. And the school is just surrounded by cornfields. How did Nick Saban get that kid? It's unbelievable. I thought Alabama looked good. I want to see Jalen Milroe throw passes against the defense that could be a little stickier to Alabama's receivers. Middle Tennessee, I don't think, was up to that task. I actually don't think Alabama's receivers are particularly dynamic, but they looked the part against a team that was not a bad team, like a team that went and beat Miami last year, but still overmatched. But I think they can probably run the ball with most teams. And their defense, I think, has a potential to be very good in a matchup like against Washington, hypothetical right now. I think Washington might have some trouble up front in that game on both sides of the ball.
But you know who Nick Saban's going to see when he sees Michael Penix and have nightmares? Cardale Jones, man. He's going to see a big guy back there slinging it. I don't know. Washington's got a shot, an absolute shot in that game.
Absolutely.
They're pressure. And you're putting that pressure on Jalen Milroe. All right, I'm calling that a toss-up too. I'm not letting you say Bama. All right, okay. Third matchup is Penn State from the north, Georgia from the south. Georgia played Tennessee Steve. Who'd they play? Tennessee Jones?
Tennessee Jones.
I don't know who they played. It was 7-0, 25 minutes into the game. 7-0, 25 minutes into the game with 5 minutes left in the half. It was 7-0. Their second leading receiver was a 5'8" walk-on. This told us nothing. If you think Carson Beck, good to go on Carson Beck. Why would you think that? There's no evidence of anything. Absolutely, jury is out on Georgia 1,000%. To me, they looked like a Brock Bowers save us offense at the moment.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I would probably bring my priors into this conversation and say that if Georgia and Penn State played each other, I don't think Penn State is up to the task on either of the lines. Like Olu Fashanu, very good. The rest of Penn State's offensive line, I'm still not sure. And I think Georgia would pound Penn State's interior defensive line into a fine paste if they played each other tomorrow. So I am taking Georgia in that matchup, despite them being fairly unknown at the moment.
You know, you're from the north, Landis.
I went to Penn State.
Philly's too. In the north.
Yeah.
All right. Matchup number 4 is Colorado versus USC. I don't think Lincoln Riley doesn't want this smoke. I don't know, man.
Oh boy.
Come on. He doesn't want it. You know who wants it? Deion Sanders wants it yesterday. As we just said, did we just say, like, every question you have about Colorado's defense, you can still have about USC's defense. So yeah, Caleb Williams is Caleb Williams. I don't know. Colorado might have this year's Heisman winner. So yes, you take USC in this. I absolutely would take Colorado with a puncher's chance.
I mean, I put USC in my top 5 with not a whole lot of conviction. It was just sort of like, well, we haven't seen Clemson play yet, so I guess I'll put USC there. So I don't even know if USC actually belongs in the conversation. I want to watch it. Like, I very much so. I want to watch this game happen because it's like, I think first to 60 or maybe it's first to 70 wins. I don't think USC could stop Colorado. I don't think Colorado could stop USC.
All right, we'll call that a toss-up too.
Yeah.
So 3 toss-ups and 1 South lean. Matchup number 5 is Ohio State versus LSU. Brian Kelly is ready to dismantle the entire LSU program after the way they played. He was like, we thought we were Georgia. We're not. The coaching's bad. The players are bad. Everything's bad. They were missing a guy on the defensive line, but they had Harold Perkins. They didn't use him the right way. Jaden Daniels got a little loose. They couldn't get in the end zone. Florida State stopped them a bunch of times and then just blew them out in the second half. Like a well-coached Ohio State team beats LSU in this situation.
Yes, but I like Mekhi Wingo and Harold Perkins are like a version of Andre Carter and Aaron Casey, like multiplied by 1 billion, and Ohio State couldn't handle the pair from Indiana. So I don't know that I'd want that matchup right now if I were Ohio State. If you're going to tell me that LSU is going to turn Harold Perkins into an off-ball linebacker and sort of like neuter him in that way, then I like Ohio State's chances more. I don't know. I probably lean LSU a little bit. It's probably more of a toss-up to me.
You just are saying that because you picked LSU to win the national championship. This is your national championship game. LSU versus Ohio State. And before the season, you picked LSU to beat Ohio State. They got to throw it to Marv. Would you think they'd throw it to Marv if they played LSU?
I would hope so. Yeah.
I got to tell, like, again, just watching Washington, the way Jalen McMillan was getting the ball yards after the catch. Emeka Ibuka came to Ohio State. Could have gone to Washington. Like, watching the game, I was like, I don't know, man. You maybe should have stayed home. Just use your dudes the way Ohio State has to use their dudes in a matchup like that. But everybody knows that. All right. That's our top 5. So our top 5 from the South behind enemy lines: Florida State, Alabama, Georgia, USC, LSU. The point we're trying to make here is in comparing the two, competitive, I think. This is not, there have been times in the past where you would have done this list and like by the time you got to the second team in the North, you'd be like, why are we doing this? Yeah. I don't feel that way right now.
I don't feel that way either. We're going to learn a lot about, I feel like we have better data points on some of the Northern teams now than we do on the more, on the higher tier Southern teams, but hopefully we'll get some of those soon.
Yeah, I'm on alert. I'm on Georgia fraud alert. Be careful. Don't like millions of questions with Georgia. Mm-hmm. When we come back, Knights of the North, we figured out the name. The 10 best players in Northern football by our rankings. Next on Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus. Back on Kings of Columbus, it's our Kings of the North Monday show. That includes the rankings of the 10 best players in the North. We call them Knights of the North, Landis. You and I each rank 15 players. Then we make a top 10 out of that. We had 9 of the 15 players the same this week, and I think we're going to see a lot of movement, at least early on in the year in this. We did it preseason, but we're trying to judge it based off a level of play. We want to give nods to good defensive players, to good offensive linemen. With not a huge subset of stats, that's more difficult to do.
Yeah.
So there's some guys who fell off here who are going to, Jerzon Newton from Illinois was on our preseason list really high. He's not here now after one game against Toledo, but guys are going to reappear, but we have to go by what happens on the field.
Yeah, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. fell out of our he was number 1 for us, right, in the preseason, and he's not in our top 10. So he had 2 catches. Like, what are you supposed to do? He might have 14 next week against Youngstown State, and he'll probably be back in here. But as I was putting mine together, I did try, as I did with the teams as well, try to go off a blank slate a little bit. And now that we have a body of work that is starting to be built go off of that and less of preseason projections. But guys like Marv, Jerzon Newton, like I had Joe Alt on my preseason one from Notre Dame, and I don't have him on this one. Like I think those guys will reappear.
Yeah. On Marv, I know. So you and I talked about, so the way this is going to work basically is we're going to do a post-game show right after the game every week. And that's our Ohio State, what happened, right? And then on Monday, it's our Northern, what happened. But Ohio State remains part of that. And I know you and Berm are going to do a show. It's already up every week where you guys rewatch the Ohio State game. What did you think of Marv on rewatch? I mean, it's one play, but the touchdown that was taken away because he stepped out of bounds did feel like to me like a little loose for a guy who is an absolute master of his craft. It's not that he wasn't locked in, but it wasn't like the full Marv experience in week one.
Yeah, no, I like locked in is the word that I had. And I'm not trying to say he was loafing it out there, but it didn't really feel like they were trying to weaponize him all that much, honestly. And maybe he knew that coming into the game, so it wasn't the precise Marv that perhaps we're used to. There were probably a handful of opportunities to get him the ball, like on the deep pass early that Kyle McCord threw to Julian Fleming that was incomplete. It was like a 2-man route concept with Fleming running a post and Marv running a deep curl, and like everybody went to Julian, and like Marv was wide open. It would have been like a 15-yard completion, but that would have been an extra catch and more yards for Marvin, obviously. So I thought I was a little puzzled with kind of how little Kyle looked his way, Kyle McCord. And part of me wonders, is like, was that by design? Like, you don't want to show all your Marv stuff early. I don't know, but they just didn't seem like they were doing a whole lot to try to get him the ball.
Yeah. So he fell off. He'll probably be back. But number one on our list is Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado quarterback. And this is because I had him first. You had him third. And we each had Michael Penix second. So they tied with points, but whoever had the most first place votes is our number one guy. I was thinking about, like, give me a quarterback right now for a game tomorrow, right, from the North, and the way Shedeur Sanders played, see it, diagnose it, rip it. And again, Penix is relentless. Bomb, 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 bomb. But it felt like Shedeur Sanders had a full field handle on exactly what Sean Lewis wanted him to do. And he threw for 510 yards. That's the most in the nation in week one. And it was like completely under control. 81% completion, 10.9 yards per attempt, 38 of 47. It was a masterclass. You know, like Penix's game is maybe more, I can't get away from the word relentless. You're more under attack, but I felt like Shedeur kind of picked you apart a little bit more, which is why I gave him the slight edge here.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I gave Penix the edge over Shedeur Sanders because Penix has a much larger body of work at this level of football. I had questions about Shedeur Sanders and whether or not he'd be able to be effective as a Power 5 quarterback when everyone's kind of bigger, faster, stronger, much different than playing at Jackson State. And he answered those questions for sure. I did feel like he was throwing to a lot of open guys. I actually don't know how much diagnosing he was doing. But I also think there's something to be said, like when a guy's open, throw him the ball and put it in a place where he can catch it and then run after the catch and go score touchdowns. And Shedeur Sanders did that too. I think that effort was more about the receivers in the end than it was him, but he did exactly what Colorado needed him to do there. And like I had him third, so like I don't think he was bad. But I think Penix, like I'd rather if I'm picking a guy, I'd rather have Penix. He was doing similar things in Washington's game as well, I think, but did it against what I think is probably a better defense than what Shedeur Sanders faced.
Shedeur Sanders 1, Michael Penix 2. We've talked a lot about Penix. Number 3 is Travis Hunter, the two-way player for Colorado. I had him third. You had him first. No, I had him fourth. I had him first. Yeah. I had him fourth, and you had him first. That's why he winds up just behind the other two guys here. How many snaps did he play?
According to Pro Football Focus, he played 145 snaps on a day where it was like 1.5 million degrees in Fort Worth, Texas. So
I think this is real. If a quarterback of a playoff team doesn't emerge, and I think this happened last year because Caleb Williams won it as a quarterback of a non-playoff team. And I thought Caleb Williams was one of the, I'm going to use the word worst, and I don't mean it, but least distinguished Heisman winners in some time, because usually it's the go-to offensive player of one of the 4 best teams in the country. if that opening happens again this year, I think Travis Hunter could absolutely walk through that door.
Yep.
Both as the Knight of the North, and we'll be giving him I want to have a banquet at medieval times, and I thought maybe it would be a crown, but if we're going to call them knights, we'll have a sword made. I want to give Travis Hunter a sword at medieval times. He absolutely might be the guy who deserves it.
I think Travis Hunter, I think this is who it was. Like our pal Ari Wasserman went and did a story on Travis Hunter a couple of years ago when Travis was still in high school, and everyone thought he was going to go to like Florida State. And I think I don't know if he still does this, but at the time he was like traveling around with a large stuffed wolf. So like if we dress him like Jon Snow and give him a sword and like he's already got the wolf, I think this is all coming together quite nicely.
Oh my God, he would come if he has a wolf. He would come to the banquet.
Yeah,
but it's extraordinary. Like it breaks your brain that he played the whole game on offense, the whole game on defense, and he was the best receiver and the best corner in the game. But this is not one of these like, oh, Colorado. He was the number one recruit in the country. As you say, he's supposed to go to Florida State. Instead, he goes to Jackson State with Deion Sanders, follows Deion Sanders to Colorado, and here he is. He's this good. Imagine if Florida State had Travis Hunter. I don't even know what they do. But I don't know if he can go two ways the whole season, but he can go two ways when it matters. And Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch would both have trouble with it.
Yeah, I do. I was watching him play as much as he did against TCU and thinking to myself, like, is this guy going to do this at altitude for half the year? I think that would be difficult. I think you're right. They are going to have to rest him. Colorado was not tremendously deep, so I think they need to be careful. I think with Travis Hunter because he is special. Like I had no hesitation putting him first on my list. He was an awesome receiver. And honestly, if all he did was play offense, I still would have probably had him on this list with some of the catches that he made. But then as a corner, he's like running routes for the receivers at TCU. And that interception he made on the wheel route in the third quarter, I was texting my brothers during the game, like, yeah, this is fun, but like TCU's about to put it on them because this is going to get away from them. I think Colorado's lack of depth is about to appear in a significant way, and TCU's going to run away with this game. And Travis Hunter just like snatched that momentum out of the air with one of the more impressive interceptions I've seen on that wheel route. And then like it was over from there.
I almost think sometimes when the ball's in the air, he forgets whether he's playing offense or defense, which turns him into an unbelievable corner because he's like, that's my ball.
Yeah, right.
He is unbelievable. If Charles Woodson playing both ways helped get him over the hump for the Heisman, and that was not this. No. We haven't seen this. This is unprecedented. So this is, and it's all real.
It's real.
It's all real.
Yeah. I do want to kind of just like people making the Charles Woodson comparisons, like keep glossing over Chris Gamble, and it annoys me.
Well, it's because Charles Woodson won the Heisman.
Yeah.
But Chris Gamble helped this team win the national title. Yeah. So yeah. No. It'd be great to get Chris Gamble on the show to talk about this. We'll effort that. All right. Fourth on the list is J.J. McCarthy. And we talked about him. We thought he raised his level and looked awesome. And he was actually tied with total points with Blake Corum, who is fifth on the list, the Michigan running back. Does that feel appropriate to you that those two Michigan guys are right there with each other?
Yeah, I think so. I had JJ higher this week than I did in the preseason. I don't even know if I had JJ maybe outside my top 10.
I think you had him 15th. On your first
no, I had
list.
Travis Hunter. I had Travis Hunter 15th because I just wanted to let you know that I was thinking about him.
Yeah.
But I had JJ maybe like 13th or 14th, I think, and I moved him up into the top 10 for all the reasons I said earlier. I want to ask you, I was watching Blake Corum. Like Blake Corum had a good game. He's clearly knocking some rust off. He had a long run around the edge where I felt like last year he would have erased the corner and scored a touchdown, and he didn't do that. And like, is that he'll do that in 4 weeks, or is that like he lost something when he got injured last year?
So I wondered about that, but I also think on that play, didn't he like hit the hole and make a cut and then get to the edge? Yeah. I thought he did all the Blake Corum stuff until the pull away from J.K. Dobbins would get caught from behind sometimes. And sometimes it's like, give me the guy who does all the stuff up to the part where he creates the opportunity to maybe get caught from behind. I'll take that. It's fun.
Yeah.
Because you see the hole, you hit the hole, you make the cut. And now maybe you're not the fastest guy, but I thought there's still a lot of Blake Corum happening.
Looked like Blake Corum. Yeah. And they had a plan for Donovan Edwards too, where I think they like used him a little more as a slot receiver to make sure they're getting both of them their touches. I thought, and I think, I can't remember now who had more carries between the two. I thought we would have seen perhaps more Donovan Edwards than we did. But
sixth on our list, Roma Dunze, big Washington receiver. just a big physical dude and just a problem, right? I mean, I think everybody watched the Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson from Florida State just be big and physical. Rome Odunze is not as tall as them, but it's a similar kind of idea of, and it's kind of same thing with Marv. Of sometimes when you get out there in space a little bit and the ball is in the air, I don't know what you do. And I think 100 yards receiving, I thought he showed that in week 1.
So I was watching that game. That game was happening the same time as Ohio State, right? So I was watching Ohio State and I had Washington on a separate screen. And they did something in that game where I don't think I've seen before. They interviewed Rome Odunze at halftime.
Oh, for real?
And I don't think I've ever seen a player do an interview at halftime before, like in a normal spot where they talk to the coaches.
Good for him. Bonus points for that. So he is 6th on our list and was a pretty clear 6th. 7th is Braylon Allen, the Wisconsin running back who I did not have on my list, was barely off it in the preseason. And again, they had 200-yard backs, Malucci and Allen. And I just think we just saw a little tease of what's to come with Braylon Allen. He looked like he always looks, which is a linebacker playing running back, but he had more space to operate, as you've mentioned a million times.
Yeah, I thought Ches Malusi was more like if he had a seam, he was going to run through it at a blazing fast speed. But like Braylon Allen was doing the side steps, the jump cuts, the making guys miss stuff that I think you come to expect from him, especially when he got to the second level of the defense. He had like a 20-ish yard touchdown run that was pretty impressive. And like maybe there's a world where they try to ride them both as much as they can throughout the year. I think to keep Braylon Allen fresh, but like I don't know, they got a big one this weekend. Maybe that's like a 25 carry game for Braylon Allen, and I think when he gets those into those kind of games, he's going to eat.
Could they be? Malusi and Allen are really good together. I mean, you can make a.
I thought
there's a discussion, right, with Edwards and Corum, like best running back combo in the country.
I think you just add them to the list, right? With what else the Big Ten has, with the guys at Michigan, the guys at Penn State, and maybe we'll see how Ohio State shakes out too. But there's a handful of teams out that have dynamic running back rooms,
and it's why I thought a lot of what Wisconsin did look good because Tanner Mordecai, 2-year starter at SMU, he knows how to do this. He did have a couple bad picks.
He's got a live arm.
You can, and like he sees it the right way. He understands this offense. It's new to everybody at Wisconsin. It's not new to him. So he knows what they want to do. And then, by the way, every time he turns around and hands it off, it's to a dude. And then there's going to be a hole because it was. I just think the pieces really are there still for this Wisconsin offense. 8, Damian Martinez for Oregon State. This is all on your vote. Why'd you have him so high?
I mean, he's probably the benefactor of the offensive line that you talked about. But he's a dynamic back. Like good speed, jump cuts, runs through contact really well. I think it's kind of perfect actually for what that offense needs and what that offensive line can block for. So just an impressive start for him. Like he was a guy that I had on my mind to put on my list in the preseason and like kind of just missed it. But I wanted to make sure to mention him here because he was productive. He had 145 rushing yards against San Jose State, which is again a fairly competent G5 team. So.
All right. Next on our list is Bo Nix from Oregon, 23-27 for 287 and 3 touchdowns in that win over Portland State. My heart's not really in this vote. I kind of in the end wish there were some other guys on our list, but you and I both voted for him at the bottom of our lists. He's a 6th-year dude. He's been around forever. He's very good, but to me, he is just not. There are multiple top-tier guys who I like more. And so it affects how I view Oregon, but I don't know. He's been around.
Yeah, it's like just holdover from preseason stuff for me. I kind of treated him the same way I treated Oregon as a team. I had him in a certain place coming into the year, and I didn't move him based off the fact that they beat up Portland State.
And then tied for 10th, Olu Fashanu, your tackle at Penn State, and Jalen McMillan at Washington, the other receiver at Washington. I put McMillan. That's all my vote for McMillan. I actually had him 6th on my list. They ran a Wildcat with him, Wildcat touchdown, direct snap to him that scored. And then again, just like on the move, yards after the catch. It's just a great pairing with the Dunze. But I thought they really used him well, and he just looks super dangerous to me. I think he's very similar. I think he and Emeka Buka are just like very similar players. And you just contrast, and Emeka was on our list preseason, but you contrast the way they were used in week 1. And I thought Washington brought out everything of what Jalen McMillan is, and Ohio State brought out nothing of what Emeka Egbuka is. So these two receiver combos, but it's a decent comparison between Odunze and Marvin Harrison Jr. and McMillan and Egbuka. And I mean, I just would show what, I mean, Ryan Day knows it. Brian Hartline knows it. But man, like that's what Emeka Egbuka should be doing every game.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't know why Ohio State didn't do it. They like handcuff themselves with their plan to just, I think, just sort of like roll those guys out there and see what happens. Whether that, instead of like drawing some stuff up for them to actually make some plays. So it was a little bit of a bummer, especially juxtaposed to what Washington did.
And then Olu Fashanu, you still love him, left tackle, Penn State.
Yeah, man. Like I was watching Drew Aller and I just like couldn't stop watching Olu Fashanu and pass protection. I think that, like, some of the run blocking was a little inconsistent in that game, and that was true for the majority of the offensive line for Penn State. They did not run the ball actually nearly as well as I thought they would against West Virginia. But Olu as a pass protector it's art. So yeah, I had to keep him on here.
So you voted for Fashanu. I didn't. I voted for Joe Alt. You didn't. Notre Dame by PFF. He's played 2 games, but he has 51 pass blocking snaps, no pressures, which is the best in the country. So I think we'll have the Alt Fashanu discussion all year, but he just missed our list. Kalen King, the Penn State corner, we both voted for him, but not very highly. So he just missed the list. Sam Hartman, no love from you, just missed the list. And I'll tell you who I had. My highest ranked Ohio State player. I did not vote for MHJ in my top 15. I voted for one Ohio State player. Do you know who it was?
It was either Chip Traynham or Sonny Styles.
It was Denzel Burke.
Oh, okay.
Is that unreasonable? Because I'm trying to think about like Kalen King. I thought Denzel Burke played like he wanted to be the best corner in the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, I think the thing that was tough with Kalen King was like he wasn't really challenged. I think he had like 5 targets all game. I don't think he had a pass breakup. And Denzel was not challenged all that much either. But when he was, he made a couple plays on the ball. So yeah, I get it.
I also threw one to my last place vote, number 15, to Aaron Casey, the Indiana guy who kept blowing up Ohio State's offense. Any other guys you want to shout out that you threw votes to at the bottom?
I did. I think I threw a vote Drew Aller's way. Did you not do that?
You did.
Yeah.
You had Drew Aller 13th on your list.
I threw a vote toward Tyler Newman, the safety at Minnesota, who I think is perhaps the best safety in the Big Ten and one of the better safeties in the country. Had a really nice interception in that game against Nebraska. And
Josh Ellis from Utah, you threw a vote to when all those injuries on the defensive line. He had a big game.
Yeah, 2 sacks. That Utah's entire defensive line was like unblockable in that game. But yeah, Ellis was the one that kind of consistently stood out to me.
All right, top 10 Knights of the North. Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders, Washington quarterback Michael Penix, Colorado two-way player Travis Hunter, Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy, Michigan running back Blake Corum, Washington receiver Rome Odunze is 6th, Wisconsin running back Braylon Allen, Oregon State running back Damian Martinez, Oregon quarterback Bo Nix is 9th, and then tied for 10th, Olu Fashanu, the Penn State left tackle, and Washington receiver Jalen McMillan. We'll do this every week. When we come back, we're going to talk about Brian Ferentz. We'll do that next on Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus. All right, we're back. Landis, this is a segment that may in the future break off into its own show if it deserves it. It's called the Brian Ferentz Survivor Show. And we're doing this because Iowa established in the offseason that if Brian Ferentz doesn't score, if the Iowa offense doesn't, no, take that back. It's not the Iowa offense. If the Iowa football team does not score 25 points per game, Brian Ferentz is going to lose his job. They also have to win 7 games. But the 25-point threshold is their threshold. If they score that many points, they usually win. And they didn't score 25 in week 1. They scored 24. And in our betting show, if you guys want to listen to that or watch that, Bill, Austin, and I are going to do that every Thursday, probably. I think it dropped Friday last week, and it might drop on Thursdays.
Yeah.
But we're going to give you Ohio State bets. We're going to give you a Northern bet. My Northern bet was Iowa under 33.5 team points, and they came out and scored touchdowns in their first 2 drives. And I was like, Brian Ferentz is now taking money out of my pocket in addition, because I go back with Brian Ferentz. I don't know if you remember. I deserve to do this segment. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like right.
Everyone's doing it, but you deserve it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I practically, people need, do people watching this know the deal? Landis, does everyone know the deal?
Refresh their memory.
Because I will say it happened a little bit last year that like, it kind of became a thing, what I did. And then I felt like I maybe underplayed it on my own shows and I was going on other people's shows and like playing it up. Last year, when Iowa played in Ohio Stadium, I went to the post-game news conference and asked Kirk Ferentz questions about why he continued to employ his son as the offensive coordinator when the offense for Iowa was this bad and had been this bad for 2 years. And Kirk Ferentz did not like my line of questioning. I then wrote a column after the game that Kirk Ferentz is basically holding the Iowa program hostage with his nepotism. I asked Gary Barta, the Iowa athletic director, about it after the game. I found him kind of wandering outside the locker room and asked him some questions. And I maybe took him by surprise, but I told him I was a reporter and he knew what was going on. And Kirk Ferentz got mad, went to his Iowa news conference the next week and said, like, I was driving home that night and I thought, well, as bad as my day was, at least I'm not that guy. And I'm that guy. So I'm that guy. And then people got mad at that. And then he apologized, but he apologized to the reporters in Iowa. Like he didn't apologize to me. And I don't need an apology. He's allowed to say what, like, that's, I don't care. But like, if you think he apologized to me, he didn't apologize to me. And people were like, oh, maybe he called Doug on the side. No, nobody ever did. Not that they should, but just to be clear, Kirk Ferentz's defense of holding a football program hostage with his nepotism was, at least he's not me, because that would be worse. At least he's not me. And then I haven't heard from, I don't want to hear from him. I don't think I have to hear from him. And then I asked him a question at Big Ten Media Days, and, you know, we didn't punch each other or anything, but I think he's holding the Iowa football program hostage with nepotism. I think Iowa's defense is so good that if their offense was moderately competent, they would be even better than they are. And they've been a very successful program under Kirk Ferentz. But I think in his old age, at the end of his career, he's putting his family over the program, and I find that intolerable. So I think that situation, the questions I asked, the way Ferentz responded, the way Gary Barta talked about it with me, that the whole thing was that, like, Gary Barta, the athletic director, is supposed to be Brian Ferentz's boss because that skirts the nepotism rules, that Brian Ferentz doesn't report to his dad. But Gary Barta told me that's like, well, it's up to Kirk. Basically, Gary Barta is gone. And Brian Ferentz is on, if you don't score 25 points a game, you're going to get fired. Do you think what happened with my questions and that situation helped create that?
I think it absolutely created it. I think, well, Brian Ferentz isn't going to do this, but let's just for 1 second entertain the notion that he could. He would owe you a cut of that contract extension, I think.
Yeah. No, I think, like, can we bet on this? Like, do the Ferentzes, can I make a bet with the Ferentzes? Like, give me part of the salary Brian's going to lose if he doesn't get. So this is why we're doing it here, right? Because I don't want the whole world, everybody else is having fun with this. And I feel like if I played a central role in creating the situation, we're going to do a show about it. So would I say that I am rooting against Brian Ferentz? I would not say that. Am I monitoring the situation eagerly and with great intrigue? Yes, because I find the whole thing ridiculous and insulting. And if you get to the point where you put a numeric total on what a guy has to, just fire him.
Yeah.
Like, this is insane.
Especially when it's as laughably low as this one is.
And so in week one, they didn't get there. So they come out, Landis, what's the final set? They get a huge kick return to start. And it sets up, I think, what is a 39-yard touchdown drive. It's a kick return and then a blown coverage by Utah State.
Yeah.
That hands them a touchdown. I was like, oh, God, here we go.
Cade McNamara was like, we got the look we wanted. It was the look you wanted the defender fall down. Congrats.
I mean, it's worked great for Ohio State opponents at times. So, and then they come out and they get a second touchdown, but then they revert to what the Iowa offense is that we expect. So what was their final total on punts versus offensive touchdowns?
So I have it at 7 punts and 3 offensive touchdowns. After their first 2 touchdown drives, they went turnover on downs, punt, punt, field goal, punt, punt, touchdown, punt, 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 end of game.
So I thought, so clearly the quarterback play is better than a year ago because Cade McNamara is competent. But they had some receivers drop some balls, and I thought their play calling got awesome. No, that's not what I thought. I thought their play calling got stale. They ran like a jet sweep early that worked, and then they ran it like the exact same play in the third quarter, got completely snuffed out. I was like, Brian, like, you can't. Yeah. Brian was like, I had like 9 plays. I had 9. Should we run the same one again that worked before? And it's like, yeah, but now. So I thought it was very typical. And honestly, if they didn't get to the 25-point threshold against Utah State, like that was a game to make some hay, to get out a little bit ahead. And now they're already 1 point behind. I like this stat. Offensive touchdowns to punts. Some other teams, Michigan, 4 offensive touchdowns, 2 punts. Penn State, 4 offensive touchdowns, 2 punts, plus the last touchdown at the end that I'm not counting. So there's actually 5 offensive touchdowns. Washington, 8 offensive touchdowns, 5 punts. Oregon State, 6 offensive touchdowns, 2 punts. Colorado, 6 offensive touchdowns, 3 punts. Florida State, 6 offensive touchdowns, 2 punts. Alabama, 8 offensive touchdowns, 3 punts. So Georgia, 5 offensive touchdowns, 5 punts. Not that great. Iowa, 3 offensive touchdowns, 7 punts. Ohio State, 2 offensive touchdowns, 4 punts. They're like kind of the only teams I tracked that had more punts than offensive touchdowns. It's a very quick shorthand, but I kind of like it. Iowa's terrible at it. They wear shirts. They're wearing shirts in the stands on Saturday. They say punting is winning. I'm going to get a shirt that says punting is Brian losing his job.
Punting is winning. I mean, to be fair, we're not going to disparage punters on this show.
I apologize. My anger at the Ferentzes has caused me to disparage punters, and I didn't mean it.
It's okay. 2 things. One, Utah State lost 10 starters from his defense last year to the transfer portal, and that is the team that Iowa only mustered 24 points against. Do you know the last time that Iowa scored a passing touchdown on its opening drive of the season?
I don't know. Is it in the 1800s?
It's close.
1964.
No, it's not that quite far, but it's 1991.
Wow. Okay. So like that. So that it's the best start they could have had, and they still couldn't get the 25. So one of the things we're going to do every week on the Brian Ferentz Survivor Show, brought to you by Put Your Company Name Here. Do you find nepotism as distasteful as we do on Kings of Columbus? Sponsor this segment. The Brian Ferentz Survivor Show, brought to you by people who think merit is important. Do you think he will get it? So it's like the March to 325 is what people are calling it. That's 13 games, 25 times 13. Each week, do a little meter. I don't know how we want to do it. Like, do you think that they will hit the threshold?
The thing that I think might save him is defensive touchdowns, which Iowa did not have against Utah State, but typically has a handful every year. So that probably makes it likely. But I don't know, I like Cade McNamara. I think like Luke Lachey and whatever they can get out of Eric All is actually a fairly dynamic tight end setup they have there. But as you mentioned earlier, like Brian Ferentz, I think has like 2 ideas when it comes to developing and scheming up an offense. So I think I would bet the under. I would take the under.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get there. I really don't. And I will give a little bit of credit. And they're in a situation where to do it otherwise would be like even worse, but they didn't try to score like a cheapy in like the final 4 minutes. You know, they weren't running 4 verts, which I was like, are they going?
They should. Yeah.
I know. It's like, do you want him to keep his job or not? Do you love your son or not? Because here's the thing that's the most distasteful of the whole thing. If your argument is that's not how we try to win, we're trying to win football games. We're not trying to pad stats. We're trying to win football with special teams and defense. So our offense, it's like old Jim Tressel thing. Don't put the defense in a bad spot. That's what we're doing here. But then you throw this 25-point per game thing on top of it, and it's antithetical to everything that you think you stand for. So now we create this situation. If you really think punting is winning, then don't stand for this. Say, if you're going to do this to my kid, then we're just done. Because it's insane. Because Iowa could go 12-0 and average 17 points a game. Mm-hmm. And Brian get fired. So that's the thing that drives me the craziest. Stand on your principles, which is we're trying to win. I think you can try to win. And I think what Wisconsin is doing and teams that are willing to open up an offense and still focus on defense, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you don't have to not throw the ball to play good defense, right? Those two aren't actually connected. But you don't have to be Michael Penix. So I just find the whole thing distasteful, and that's why we're going to do 15 minutes on it every week. So Brian Ferentz Survivor Show, I think he's under. I think it does not look good after week 1, but we will be back next week. They play Iowa State. We'll see how that goes. And if you're Matt Campbell, I don't know, you might want to keep Brian Ferentz around. So maybe the Iowa State defense will be kneeling late in the game. Like, go ahead and score, guys. It's fine. We want Brian to get the over. So we'll see how that goes. Brian Ferentz Survivor Show brought to you by Kings of Columbus and any business that believes in merit. When we come back, we'll wrap it up, looking ahead to next week on Kings of Columbus, Kings of the North. All right, Doug and Bill, back to wrap this up with a look ahead. We're always going to do this every Monday, talk about the games of the North in the coming week that matter. Took a lot out of me, that Ferentz section, though, I got to tell you. A little gassed. All right, 5 games we want to talk about, including one at the end that is the embodiment of this show. If we were fully up and running, we'd be there. We'd be broadcasting live, maybe all week. This is a game. It truly warms my heart that it's happening. And Landis was just researching trophies. It's not the first game we're talking about, though. We're going to talk about Wisconsin at Washington State. These are 2 of our northern teams. Wisconsin is a road favorite. Wisconsin -6. But you got to keep in mind, Michael Penix takes all the juice up in the state of Washington. Cam Ward, the Washington State quarterback, actually threw for 1 more yard than Michael Penix last week. Michael Penix for Washington threw for 450. Cam Ward for Washington State threw for 451. What do you think of this matchup, Landis?
Yeah, it's intriguing. I want to see Wisconsin's defense, what it looks like against a dynamic quarterback like that. Washington State beat Colorado State, which is like a mid-tier kind of Mountain West program. So I don't want to make too much of them winning comfortably, although they were up 36-3 in the fourth quarter, and then Colorado State kind of put in a couple touchdowns late to make it look a little closer than it actually was. Cam Ward is very dynamic. I think make guys miss, will run around. He had 40 rushing yards and a touchdown in that game. He did fumble 3 times and lost 2 of them. So I think that's something to watch in this game. Can Wisconsin generate a couple of turnovers? But I think it's more interesting for me on the Wisconsin side. It's just a level up from what they faced in week 1 when they beat Buffalo. I think there was a lot of reason to be encouraged by what Wisconsin showed in week 1, but now they got to go do it on the road against a Power 5 opponent. It's a night game. It's a primetime spot on ABC. It's a nice spotlight, I think, for Luke Fickell's program and what they're trying to do there. And I just want to see how they handle all of it.
Second game, we'll talk about Oregon at Texas Tech. This is fascinating. Oregon coming off the 81 points it dropped on Portland State. Texas Tech coming off an upset loss to Wyoming. Shout out to Austin Ward. Joey McGuire at Texas Tech, a coach everybody loves. I just think this is a spot. Oregon is favored on the road by 6.5. I think Oregon is going to be flying high, and Texas Tech is going to be mad. I think Texas Tech preseason was a nice dark horse pick to win the Big 12. We've seen Baylor already stumble. You see TCU isn't who you thought they'd be. Texas might be pretty good, but I don't know that that's indicative of who Texas Tech is. And I think Joey McGuire is a real dude, and now he has a mad team coming home. And the quarterback for Texas Tech is Tyler Shuck, who started his career at Oregon and then kind of got pushed to the side when Oregon brought in Anthony Brown as the transfer who came in and beat Ohio State in 2021. Mm-hmm. So Tyler Shuck is playing his old team. And Joey McGuire has a team that just lost, and I think Oregon has a fake good win. And I think this is a absolute potential trip up for Oregon here.
I don't disagree. I think Joe McGuire probably relishes the idea of playing underdog a little bit. He gets him in his house. I don't think Tyler Shuck is very good, but I guess it's compelling that he does get to play against his former team. And I do think there are a lot of expectations for Oregon this year, and I don't know what a lot of it's I have them too. I'm expecting them to be good as well, but there's not a whole lot there to really base it off of, other than you think Dan Lanning might have a little bit of juice and there's some talent on that roster. So they played a walkthrough game in week 1, and now they get to play a real team.
Tyler Shuck, 31 of 47 for 338, 3 scores and an interception in that week 1 loss to Wyoming. All right, game 3 we want to talk about. You're interested in Notre Dame going on the road to NC State.
I'm interested in Notre Dame playing a team that might have a pulse. Notre Dame.
Sam Hartman disdain. It just seeps out of you.
Sam Hartman could end up being very good, and Notre Dame I think could end up being
very good. He's thrown for 30,000 yards in his college career.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel fantastic for him. He, like I said before, he is an upgraded quarterback. Regardless of what happens the rest of the year, it's an upgrade for Notre Dame. I want to have the conversation: does he elevate Notre Dame's ceiling to being a true playoff contender? And we don't have nearly enough evidence to really think one way or the other there, but I do think people are getting carried away a little bit with Notre Dame. It died down last week because they played Tennessee State, and obviously you don't really pay attention to that. But like they beat a terrible Navy team, and everyone wanted to crown them right away. And I just want to see them play somebody that has like some like for like athletes. I don't think NC State's a world beater. They kind of had their hands full with UConn for a little bit last week, but it's on the road and it's a Power 5 opponent. And if Notre Dame goes out there and handles business, which I think they very well could, then I will start to take them more seriously than I am currently.
I'm just interested in the Notre Dame doubt leaving this show. So Notre Dame is 7.5 point road favorite. All three of those first three games we mentioned, road favorites. Game 4, Nebraska, Colorado. Colorado favored by 3. And I think there's some portion of people, maybe I'm doing a straw man here, who think that, all right, Nebraska lost a heartbreaker to Minnesota, 13-10. Colorado dropped a gazillion on TCU, but actually Colorado's going to get its comeuppance, and week 1 wasn't indicative of anything, and that's why this line is close. I think Colorado is going to boat race them. I don't know where the hesitation is and why this is a field goal game. What are people outthinking themselves here?
Seems like it. Nebraska's defense looked okay against Minnesota. I think it's quite possible that maybe even that Nebraska's defense is perhaps better than TCU's. Maybe not. That's probably a stretch. But I think Nebraska's defense is not awful. Like maybe we'll put up a stiffer challenge than people are envisioning. There will be opportunities, I suppose, for Nebraska to do things on offense. Whether or not I'm confident in their ability to do that is another conversation. I don't think Jeff Sims is very good. He threw some awful interceptions in that game against Minnesota. So it's at Colorado, like Big Noon's going back there. Deion's going to be on Fox, I think, every week this year. I also am leaning like Colorado puts it on them there, but that's an interesting line.
Yeah. Sometimes the sport outthinks itself, and we'll come back next week and see if we were right or we were wrong. Last one. This is the game of the week. We could not stamp our stamp of approval on a game more than we are doing this. This is truly a Kings of the North special. And if we were fully up and running, we would be there for it, camped out all week. It's at Pitt, right? Cincinnati at Pitt. It is a team from the ACC and a team from the Big 12 who are in neighboring northern states and are both part of our Kings of the North discussion. It's why this show exists, because the geography of conferences doesn't make sense anymore. And the ACC latest editions made that more clear than ever. But I still think geography matters to college football. And it warms not just my heart, but every part of my body that Cincinnati and Pitt are playing this year and next in a home and home, because it makes so much sense when the conferences that they're in don't make any sense. Why is this game being played?
Why is it being played? They just scheduled it.
They scheduled it in 2015.
Yeah, they scheduled it a while ago.
Who knew what the future of college football would be in 2015? But here we are. Thank you to those people.
They played each other every year from 2005 to 2012 as members of the Big East. They played for what I just learned about 4 minutes ago, a trophy called the Paddle Wheel Trophy. That is... people maybe listening might be more familiar with the Land Grant Trophy and how it's like, it looks like an ugly wedding cake that weighs 100 pounds and is hard for one person to carry. It's like tiered. This is very similar. And on top of it is like the thing that's on ships that you kind of move back and forth to say like full steam ahead or come to full stop or whatever. You might have seen it like in Titanic or something. That's what this thing looks like. I have not seen anything that says it's actually up for grabs, which is disappointing, but it's a cool rivalry, right? Like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, I think, are sort of very similar cities. Pitt as a program, I think there were times where they were kind of simpatico as programs too. Maybe that's a little different now. We'll see how Cincinnati wants to build its stuff, but I think it's a compelling matchup. You like the quarterback matchup here, right?
Yeah, it's the embodiment of college football. They're starting 2 sixth-year quarterbacks who are both on their third teams. Emory Jones, the quarterback for Cincinnati, last week was 19 of 23 for 345 yards in a 66-13 win over Eastern Kentucky. He started his career at Florida after originally being committed to Ohio State. Starts his career at Florida, played last year at Arizona State. Now he's at Cincinnati. He's going up against Phil Dracovic, who started his career at Notre Dame, then went to Boston College, now is at Pitt. Last week in a 45-7 win over Wofford, he was 17 of 23 for 214 yards. This is Big 12, ACC, Ohio, Pennsylvania, 2 sixth-year third-team quarterbacks playing for a big paddle. What more do you want?
I think what's the line?
It is Pitt by 8, I think.
Yeah, I think Emory Jones, who, credit to him for throwing for 345 and 5 touchdowns against Eastern Kentucky. I think Pat Narduzzi and them boys are going to put a little something different out there for him to handle.
Think?
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things, like Pat Narduzzi has run a really good program at Pitt. I mean, they've had a lot of success, more than you think. But Cincinnati's the one who got to the playoff, right? So, I mean, it's like, who would you rather be? 4 hours apart, 291 miles. Since they're playing for a paddle wheel, I was trying to look up, can you take a boat from Cincinnati to Pittsburgh? And it seems like maybe no. Are there enough rivers to get you?
You can take the Ohio River, yeah.
You can take the Ohio River. Okay,
well, I don't
I'm
know.
looking at a river map. Okay,
I don't know if the Ohio River is navigable from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati, but it certainly runs from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati.
I hope we're going up there. Hey, we'll make a turn there. That's what we would be doing if we were next year. Next year, when Kings of the North is a full-throated, all-here show, you and I will broadcast live. We will, because next year it's in Cincinnati. We will start in Pittsburgh, and we will broadcast from a barge all week as we travel from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati on a river. Ask Scott if we can do that.
Did you know? So there are times where I've looked up river cruises in Europe, and one time I saw a commercial for river cruises in the States, and it was the Mississippi River, traveling down the Mississippi River, or the Columbia River, and see mountains and stuff. You can take a river cruise from Pittsburgh to St. Louis.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Cincinnati's got to be a stop on that. We'll just get off. Oh, we don't even have to be in a barge. We'll be in a cruise. We'll have a waiter. Okay. Join us on the Kings of the North River Cruise from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati next year. Our ticket availability will be known shortly. But for now, get ready for this game Saturday, Pittsburgh versus Cincinnati. It's going to be a great game. All right. That's our brief look ahead. That's our Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus Monday show that you can look forward to finding us here every Monday on the podcast feed. Bill Landis and I will be doing this. We'll be back with the Kings of Columbus episode midweek where we dive back in on Ohio State. We'll be doing our betting shows later in the week, Thursday afternoon, probably more often than not. We'll have our post-game show every Saturday after Ohio State. This week, the Buckeyes hosting Youngstown State. And we're going to keep going back and forth, Landis, between digging in on Ohio State, because that's what you and I have been doing for you for a decade, me for almost 2 decades. But we're also expanding. So we want to take what we've done with Ohio State and bring it to a larger group of people and bring it to the masses. And nobody else is talking Northern footballs like this. So if you have a friend who likes Penn State or Michigan or Iowa, maybe not Iowa, or Minnesota or Oregon or Washington or Boston, maybe not Boston College, right? Tell them we're talking Northern football here, and we're talking teams in context of each other, and we're reminding people that college football isn't just about the South, Landis. That's part of what we're doing here every Monday.
That's right. College football is about barge travel on rivers in the Midwest.
I can't. I'm so excited to live on a barge. We could just live on the barge all season next year, because you and I don't go to the games. We do the post-game show.
Yeah.
Live on a barge for 3 months, cover Northern college football. All right, we'll work it out. For now, we appreciate you guys being part of it. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus.